The transport shuttle's engines hummed to a stop as Laraxi pressed her face against the small porthole, watching the alien world called Earth grow larger beneath her. Her blue skin shimmered with nervous perspiration, and she unconsciously twisted a strand of her vibrant red curls around her finger, a habit her research supervisor had warned her to suppress among humans. "Remember, researcher Laraxi," Commander Vex's stern voice echoed in her memory. "Humans are primitive but dangerous. Their concept of hunger is purely biological aggression. Do not let your guard down." The shuttle touched down with barely a tremor, and Laraxi gathered her research equipment with trembling hands. This cultural exchange program was supposed to advance her career, but right now, all she felt was terror. Her people, the Zalathi, had evolved past such base instincts centuries ago. They sustained themselves through photosynthetic absorption and meditation. The idea of consuming other living beings for survival was barbaric, and apparently, humans took it further, using hunger as a metaphor for violence and conquest. The airlock hissed open, and Laraxi stepped onto the landing platform. The first thing that struck her was the overwhelming assault on her senses. The cacophony of sounds, the riot of colors, and most disturbing of all, the scents. Everything smelled so alive. "You must be Laraxi," a warm voice called out, and she turned to see a tall, human male approaching. He had dark hair, kind brown eyes, and a smile that seemed genuine despite showing his predatory teeth. "I'm Kai Morrison, your cultural liaison. Welcome to Earth." Laraxi clutched her research pad tighter and managed a stiff nod. "Greetings, human Kai. I am researcher Laraxi of the Zalathi Science Collective." Kai's smile widened and he gestured toward a ground vehicle. "Come on, let's get you settled. I bet you're exhausted from the journey. I know I'm absolutely starving. Haven't eaten all day waiting for you to arrive. I could probably eat a horse." He paused, studying her alarmed expression. "Or better yet, I could just eat you up. You're even prettier than your file photo suggested." The blood drained from Laraxi's already pale blue features. Her research pad clattered to the ground as she stumbled backward, her red curls bouncing with the sudden movement. This was it. The human was already expressing his hunger, his desire to consume her flesh. She'd heard the stories, the warnings about human cannibalistic tendencies disguised as social interactions. "Please," she whispered, backing toward the shuttle. I am not very nutritious. My species has very little muscle mass, and our blood contains high levels of copper that would be toxic to your digestive system." Kai stopped mid-stride, his expression shifting from friendly enthusiasm to confusion. "What? Laraxi, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." You said you wanted to eat me," she managed, her voice barely audible. "I understand this is your cultural greeting, expressing your hunger for my flesh, but perhaps we could delay the consumption until I have completed some preliminary research?" For a moment, Kai stared at her in complete bewilderment. Then, unexpectedly, he began to laugh, not the cruel cackle she expected from a predator, but a warm, genuine sound that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. "Oh, Laraxi," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "I think we've got our first major cultural misunderstanding here. I don't want to literally eat you. It's just an expression. Here, let me show you what I actually meant." Before she could protest or flee, Kai gently took her arm and guided her toward the vehicle. "When humans say we're starving, we just mean we're really hungry for food, regular food. And when I said I could eat you up, I meant, well, that you're cute, attractive. It's a compliment, not a threat." Laraxi allowed herself to be led, her scientific mind racing to process this information. "So, you do not wish to consume my physical form?" "Definitely not," Kai assured her, opening the vehicle door. "But I am genuinely hungry for some actual food. How about we stop by my place and I'll make us some spaghetti? You can observe human eating habits firsthand, safely from the other side of the table." As they drove through the bustling human city, Laraxi found herself stealing glances at her host. His hands were steady on the steering mechanism, his profile relaxed and non-threatening. Yet something about the way he'd looked at her when he called her attractive had sent an unfamiliar warmth coursing through her system. "Kai," she said tentatively, "when you said I was cute, what did you mean exactly?" He glanced at her, and she caught something in his expression, a fleeting look that was neither hunger nor aggression, but something else entirely. Something that made her skin tingle and her heart's beat faster. "That," he said with a smile that somehow seemed different from his earlier ones, "is probably a conversation for after dinner. Let's start with the basics of human cuisine first." As they pulled into his driveway, Laraxi realized her mission had just become infinitely more complicated. She'd come to study human hunger, but she was beginning to suspect there were types of appetite her research had never prepared her for. The morning sun filtered through Kai's kitchen windows as Laraxi sat at the breakfast table, methodically documenting her observations. Her red curls caught the light as she bent over her research pad, occasionally glancing up to watch Kai prepare what he called scrambled eggs. "I have a hunger for knowledge about your species," she announced, then paused, frowning. "Wait, that cannot be correct. Knowledge is not consumable matter." Kai chuckled, whisking the eggs with practiced ease. "Actually, that's perfect usage, see? You're getting the hang of human expressions already." Laraxi's blue skin flushed a deeper shade, something that had been happening with alarming frequency around her host. "Your language is unnecessarily complex. Yesterday you mentioned having an appetite for adventure. How does one consume adventure?" "You don't literally eat it," Kai explained, pouring the mixture into a heated pan. "It means you crave excitement, new experiences like—" He turned to face her and she caught that look again, the same expression from the day before that made her pulse quicken. "Like how I have an appetite for getting to know you better." The way he said it, with his voice dropping slightly and his eyes holding hers, sent that strange warmth spiraling through her chest again. She ducked her head, pretending to focus on her notes while her hearts hammered against her ribs. "You keep looking at me with that expression," she said carefully. "My research suggests this is predatory behavior. Assessing prey." Kai's spatula paused mid-stir. "Predatory. Laraxi, I'm not—" He seemed to struggle with something, then moved closer to where she sat. "May I show you something?" She nodded, though every instinct screamed danger as he approached. But instead of baring teeth or making threatening gestures, Kai simply reached out and gently tucked one of her wayward curls behind her ear. His touch was impossibly soft, and she found herself leaning into it without conscious thought. "This is how humans look at someone they find attractive," he said quietly. "Not like prey, but like something precious. Something we want to protect and cherish." Laraxi's breath caught. Her skin where he'd touched her seemed to burn with pleasant fire. I do not understand these sensations you are causing in my nervous system." "What kind of sensations?" His hand was still near her face, close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from his skin, elevated heart rate, increased body temperature, a curious tingling in my extremities. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you poisoning me?" Kai's laughter was rich and warm. "Not poisoning. That's attraction, Laraxi. Physical attraction. Impossible. My species does not experience such primitive urges. Are you sure about that?" He leaned closer and she caught his scent, something uniquely human and inexplicably appealing. "Because right now you're looking at me the same way I look at you." Before she could protest, the smoke alarm began shrieking. Kai jumped back, cursing as he rushed to the stove where the forgotten eggs had begun to burn. In the chaos of opening windows and waving away smoke, Laraxi tried to process what had just happened. Later that afternoon, Kai insisted on teaching her to cook, claiming it was essential cultural education. Laraxi found herself standing beside him at the counter, ostensibly learning to knead bread dough but actually becoming hyper-aware of every brush of his arm against hers. "Feel the texture," he instructed, his hands covering hers as he guided her movements in the dough. "It should be smooth and elastic." Laraxi could barely focus on the bread. the solid warmth of his body behind her, the way his breath stirred, her curls when he spoke, the strength in his hands as they moved with hers. It was overwhelming. She found herself pressing back against him slightly, then froze in horror at her own behavior. "I apologize," she stammered, trying to step away. "I seem to be malfunctioning." But Kai's arms tightened gently around her, keeping her in place. "You're not malfunctioning. You're just feeling something new. My people we do not engage in such physical contact. What do you do when you care about someone?" Laraxi considered this. "We share thoughts through meditation. We compose harmonious frequencies together. We what? We synchronize our biorhythms during the conjunction of the twin moons," she finished quietly. "But that is purely for reproductive purposes. It does not involve these chaotic sensations." Kai turned her around to face him, flower, dusting both their hands. "Maybe chaotic isn't always bad. Maybe sometimes it's exciting." She stared up at him, noting the way his pupils had dilated, the slight flush across his cheekbones. "You are experiencing the same physiological responses." "Yeah, I am. This is most irregular. The best things usually are." He was leaning closer, and Laraxi found herself rising on her toes to meet him. Their lips were almost touching when her research pad chimed with an incoming message from her supervisor. They sprang apart, and Laraxi fumbled for the device with trembling hands. Commander Vex's stern face appeared on the screen. "Researcher Laraxi, report on human feeding behaviors." Yes, Commander. Humans engage in complex food preparation rituals that involve significant physical proximity." Vex's eyes narrowed. "You appear flushed. Are you experiencing symptoms of illness?" "Merely cultural immersion side effects, Commander." After ending the call, Laraxi looked at Kai, who was watching her with an expression she was beginning to recognize, concern mixed with something deeper. "Your people don't approve of this, do they?" he asked. "I am not certain my people have a framework for understanding this," she admitted. "Then maybe," Kai said, stepping closer again, "it's time to create a new framework." That night, as Laraxi lay in the guest room Kai had prepared for her, she stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was developing some kind of human-induced madness. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kai's face, felt the phantom touch of his hands on hers. For the first time in her life, researcher Laraxi was hungry for something she couldn't name, and it terrified her more than any predator ever could. 3 days into her stay, Laraxi finally understood the difference between human hunger and human desire, and the revelation hit her like a solar flare. She was in Kai's living room, cross-referenced her notes with human literature he'd provided, when she came across a poem that made her freeze. The words spoke of hungry hearts and devouring kisses and consuming passion. Suddenly, the pattern became clear. "Kai," she called, her voice tight with excitement and something else she couldn't name. He appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, looking concerned. "What is it? You sound—" "I understand now," she interrupted, rising from the couch with her research pad clutched to her chest. "Human hunger is not merely biological. It is metaphorical, emotional. When you said you could eat me up, you were not expressing predatory intent. You were expressing attraction." Kai's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Yes, that's right. And when humans speak of starving for affection or having an appetite for companionship, you are describing emotional needs as if they were physical ones." "Laraxi," Kai started, but she was pacing now, her scientific mind racing. "This explains the physiological responses I have been experiencing, the elevated heart rate, the temperature fluctuations, the strange sensations when you touch me. These are not symptoms of illness or malfunction. They are indicators of what?" Kai asked softly. She stopped pacing and looked at him, directly. "Of hunger. I am experiencing hunger for you, Kai Morrison. Not the desire to consume your flesh, but something far more complex. I want—" She struggled for words her language didn't possess. I want to be close to you in ways my species has no terminology for. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Kai set down the dish towel and moved closer, his movements careful and deliberate. What kind of closeness? He asked. Laraxi felt her blue skin flush deeper. I want to synchronize more than just biorhythms. I want to understand why your touch makes my nervous system react so chaotically. I want to know what happens when humans consume each other with passion. Are you sure? Kai was close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to simple cultural observation. I'm tired of observing, she whispered. I want to experience. Kai reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the delicate bone structure beneath her blue skin. Then let me show you what human hunger really means. When his lips touched hers, Laraxi understood why her people had no words for this sensation. It was beyond language, beyond scientific classification. His mouth was warm and soft, moving against hers with a gentleness that made her knees weak. She had expected the kiss to be violent, consuming, but instead it was like drinking starlight. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer as something wild and desperate awakened in her chest. She kissed him back awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as he made soft sounds of encouragement against her mouth. Is this what you meant by devouring? She gasped when they broke apart. This is just the beginning, Kai murmured, his forehead resting against hers. There are so many different types of hunger, Laraxi. Hunger for touch, for intimacy, for connection. Let me show you. He led her to the couch, and she went willingly, her scientific curiosity now perfectly aligned with her body's strange new desires. When he pulled her down beside him, she marveled at how natural it felt to curl against his side, to rest her head on his shoulder. Your heartbeat is very loud, she observed, pressing her palm to his chest. That's because of you, he said, covering her hand with his. You affect me just as much as I affect you. She looked up at him, studying the way his eyes had darkened, the slight flush across his cheekbones. Show me more of this human hunger. Kai's hands threaded through her red curls as he kissed her again, deeper this time. His tongue traced the edge of her lower lip, and she gasped at the sensation, her body arching against his instinctively. The kiss became more urgent, more desperate, as if they were indeed starving and finding sustenance in each other. His hands roamed her back, mapping the alien landscape of her body with reverent touches. When his fingers found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, she made a sound she'd never heard herself make before, something between a sigh and a moan. Your skin is so soft, he murmured against her throat. And you smell like ozone and honey. Is that appealing to humans? She managed, her voice breathy. It's intoxicating. She understood that word now, the way he touched her, kissed her, whispered her name. It was indeed like being under the influence of some powerful substance. Her usually logical mind was clouded with sensation and desire. When Kai's hand slipped beneath the edge of her shirt, she tensed momentarily. My anatomy may be different from human females. I don't care about different, he said, his eyes meeting hers. I care about you, all of you. His touch was reverent as he explored the planes of her body, and she marveled at how something so simple could generate such intense pleasure. Every caress sent sparks through her nervous system, and she found herself making those strange sounds again, her hips moving restlessly against the couch cushions. Kai, she breathed, not sure what she was asking for but knowing she needed more. No, he whispered, I feel it too. This hunger for you is driving me crazy. They kissed and touched until the sun began to set outside, learning the language of each other's bodies, discovering that desire was indeed a form of hunger, one that grew stronger with each taste rather than being satisfied. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Laraxi understood something fundamental about human nature that all her research had missed. Your species does not just consume for survival, she said, tracing patterns on his chest. You consume for pleasure, for connection, for love. Now you're getting it, Kai said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Laraxi smiled, an expression that was becoming more natural each day. I am going to conduct much more thorough research. His laughter rumbled through his chest, and she decided that sound was her new favorite frequency in the universe. The next week passed in a blur of discovery and desire. Laraxi found herself abandoning her rigid research schedule in favor of exploring this new dimension of human behavior and her own responses to it. Her reports to Commander Vex had become increasingly creative exercises in omission. You seem to be adapting well to human customs, Kai observed one evening as they prepared dinner together. The simple act of cooking had become an intimate dance, their bodies moving around each other with practiced ease, hands brushing, hips bumping companionably. I am finding human culture more complex than initially anticipated, Laraxi replied, accepting the spoon he offered for her to taste the sauce. Their fingers lingered as she took it, and she saw his pupils dilate in response. Even after a week of escalating intimacy, the smallest touches still sent electricity through both of them. She hummed, savoring the flavor. This hunger you call taste is remarkably sophisticated. Speaking of hunger, Kai said, moving closer until she was trapped between his body and the counter. I've been starving for you all day. The familiar phrase no longer sparked fear, but rather a deep, aching want that pooled low in her belly. Show me, she whispered. His mouth descended on hers with a hunger that had grown more intense each day. Where their first kisses had been, tentative explorations these were claiming, desperate, full of the passion that had been building between them. His hands gripped her waist, lifting her easily onto the counter so they were at eye level. I love how you taste, he murmured against her lips. Like starlight and something uniquely you. Laraxi's legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer, marveling at how perfectly their bodies seemed to fit together despite their different origins. In my language, we have a word, Jai. It means the moment when two forces synchronize. Perfectly. What about it? His lips were tracing patterns down her throat, finding spots that made her gasp and arch against him. I think we are Jai, Kai Morrison. He pulled back to look at her, something fierce and tender in his expression. I think you're right. The dinner forgotten, he carried her to his room, and Laraxi felt a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. They had been building to this moment for days, each touch more intimate, each kiss more consuming. Are you sure? He asked, setting her gently on the bed. We don't have to. I am sure, she interrupted, reaching up to cup his face. I want to understand this deepest form of human hunger. I want to experience it with you. What followed was a revelation that transcended all her scientific understanding. Kai's hands and mouth mapped every inch of her blue skin with reverent devotion, and she discovered that her body was capable of sensations she had never imagined. When he whispered words of desire and affection against her skin, she felt something, fundamental shift inside her chest. You're so beautiful, he breathed, his hands trembling slightly as they explored the graceful lines of her alien form. Perfect. Laraxi had never considered her appearance through the lens of beauty, but the way Kai looked at her, like she was something precious and miraculous, made her feel transformed. When she touched him in return, learning the landscape of human masculinity, she marveled at the sounds she could draw from him, the way his body responded to her inexperienced caresses. Their coming together was a slow, careful dance of discovery. Kai was patient, attentive, making sure she was comfortable with each new sensation. And when they finally joined completely, Laraxi understood why humans used words like consuming and devouring to describe passion. It was overwhelming in the most wonderful way, the feeling of being so completely connected to another being, of moving together in perfect rhythm, of building towards something that felt larger than both of them combined. When the crescendo finally crashed over them, Laraxi cried out in a mixture of her native language and broken English, her body arching against Kai's, as waves of pleasure unlike anything she'd ever experienced rolled through her. In the aftermath, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Laraxi traced patterns on Kai's chest and tried to process what had just happened. "My people," she said softly, "we believed physical mating was merely a biological function. Efficient, purposeful, brief. And now?" Kai's fingers combed through her curls, the gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Now I understand why humans write poetry about it. Why you create art and music trying to capture these feelings." She lifted her head to meet his eyes. "It is not consumption in the way I originally feared. It is communion." "Communion," he repeated thoughtfully. "I like that." "Kai," she said, suddenly serious, "what happens when my assignment ends? When I am supposed to return to my people?" His mind-diced arms tightened around her. "I don't know, but I know I'm not ready to let you go. This, us, it's become something I need. Like breathing." Laraxi felt tears prick her eyes, another human response she was adopting. "I am supposed to be objective, scientific, but I find myself becoming attached. Is that so terrible?" She considered this, thinking of her sterile, logical world waiting for her among the stars. Then she looked at Kai, this human who had shown her that hunger could be beautiful, that desire could be sacred, that connection could transform you completely. "No," she whispered. "I think it might be the most wonderful thing I have ever experienced." They made love again in the pre-dawn hours, slower this time, savoring each touch, each kiss, each whispered endearment. And as the sun rose over Earth, Laraxi realized she was no longer just studying human hunger. She had become consumed by it, body and soul. The only question now was whether she was brave enough to let it transform her completely. The morning of Laraxi's scheduled departure arrived with cruel efficiency. Her transport shuttle sat on the landing pad like a silver reminder of the life she was supposed to return to, while her heart felt anchored to Earth by invisible threads. She stood at Kai's kitchen window, watching him pack what he insisted on calling road trip snacks despite her protests that Zalathi didn't require solid food during space travel. Her red curls caught the morning light and she absently twisted them around her finger, a habit she no longer tried to suppress. "You know," Kai said, appearing behind her with a travel mug of coffee, "for someone who's supposed to be leaving, in 3 hours you seem remarkably calm." Laraxi turned to face him, and the sight of his sleep-tousled hair and concerned eyes made her chest tighten with an emotion she finally had a name for. "I am not calm. I am terrified. Of going back to your people? Of leaving you." The words came out as barely a whisper. "Kai, I think I have experienced something my species has no framework for understanding." He set down the coffee and pulled her into his arms, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the past weeks. "What's that?" "Love," she said, simply. "I believe I have fallen in love with you, and I do not know how to reconcile this with my scientific mission." Kai's hands cupped her face, thumbs tracing the delicate bone structure he'd memorized through countless caresses. "Then don't reconcile it. Choose it instead. It is not that simple. My people, my career, my entire life. Is any of that worth more than this?" He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips with infinite tenderness. "Than us?" Before she could answer, her communication pad chimed with an incoming message. Commander Vex's stern face appeared on the screen, and Laraxi felt Kai tense, behind her. "Researcher Laraxi, you are approaching departure time. Please provide your final analysis of human hunger behaviors." Laraxi looked at Kai, then back at the screen. For the first time in her life, she decided to tell her superior exactly what she had learned. "Commander, human hunger is far more complex than our initial assessment suggested. It encompasses not just biological needs, but emotional, spiritual, and intimate desires. They use hunger as a metaphor for love, for passion, for the deep connections that bind their society together." Vex's expression grew suspicious. "That sounds dangerously close to anthropomorphizing primitive behaviors." "Researcher," With respect, Commander, I do not believe these behaviors are primitive. I believe they are evolved beyond our current understanding. Explain. Liraxi felt Kai's hand squeeze her shoulder supportively. Human hunger, specifically their capacity for love, creates bonds that transcend individual survival. They willingly sacrifice personal benefit for the welfare of their partners. They create art, music, and literature celebrating these connections. They build their entire society around the concept of chosen family units based on mutual affection, rather than mere genetic compatibility. This is highly irregular analysis, researcher. Are you certain you have maintained proper scientific objectivity? Liraxi met Kai's eyes in the window's reflection and saw her own transformation mirrored there. No, Commander, I have not. I have experienced human love firsthand, and it has changed me fundamentally. I no longer wish to observe it from a distance, I wish to live it. The silence on the communication link stretched for several heartbeats. Finally, Vex spoke, her voice deadly quiet. You are requesting to abandon your mission and remain on Earth? I am requesting to extend my mission indefinitely. There is much more to learn about human emotional connections, and I believe I am uniquely positioned to conduct this research. By compromising your objectivity with one of the subjects, by understanding that some things cannot be studied from the outside, Liraxi said firmly. Love is not a behavior to be catalogued, Commander. It is a force that transforms everything it touches, including the researcher. Vex's image flickered with what might have been anger. You are making a grave mistake, researcher. Attachment to alien species is natural, Liraxi interrupted. Beautiful, necessary. Commander, I have discovered that hunger, true hunger, is not about consumption. It is about connection, and I choose to be connected. She ended the transmission before Vex could respond, then turned to face Kai fully. He was staring at her with an expression of wonder and fierce joy. Did you just give up your entire career for me? He asked. I gave up a career that was incomplete, she corrected. I am choosing a life that is full. Liraxi. His voice was rough with emotion. I love you. I love your brilliant mind, your curiosity, the way you see wonder in everything. I love how you taste like starlight and feel like home in my arms. Love you too, she whispered, the words feeling like a revelation each time she said them. I love your patience, your kindness, the way you make ordinary moments feel like magic. I love how you showed me that hunger can be beautiful. They came together in a kiss that was both celebration and promise, passion and tenderness intertwined. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and smiling. So, Kai said, what happens now? Now, Liraxi replied, I conduct new research. I want to understand human marriage customs, human child-rearing practices, human methods of building a life together. That could take decades to study properly. Good thing I have a very thorough methodology. That evening, as they lay entwined in bed after making love with the desperate passion of people who almost lost each other, Liraxi traced patterns on Kai's chest and marveled at how completely her understanding had changed. I used to think hunger was about taking, she murmured, about consuming something until it was gone. And now? Now I know it is about giving, about feeding each other's souls until they grow beyond what either could be alone. You know, Kai said, pressing a kiss to her hair, you're going to make a terrible scientist if you keep getting this poetic. Perhaps, she agreed, but I think I will make an excellent human. The best, he confirmed, pulling her closer. Though technically, you'll always be Zalathi too. Zalathi human hybrid, she mused. The first of my kind. Pioneer, Kai said. Explorer, the bravest person I know. As they drifted off to sleep, Liraxi reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had come to Earth to study human hunger and discovered something far more profound. That love was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be embraced. That true connection required vulnerability, trust, and the courage to let someone else's heart beat in rhythm with your own. Outside their window, the stars shone down on Earth, and somewhere among them, a transport shuttle returned to Zalathi, space without its passenger. But Laraxi felt no regret. She had found her home in the arms of a human who had taught her that the greatest hunger of all was the one that fed your soul, and she intended to spend the rest of her life satisfying that beautiful, consuming, life-giving appetite, one kiss, one touch, one shared moment at a time. The end.